All right, let's jump right into this explainer. We're going to unpack a seemingly simple list of the 50 most common adjectives to reveal the hidden architecture of how we actually describe our reality. Adjectives are basically the color palette of our language. They give shape, scale, and emotion to all the nouns around us. But when researchers distilled the entire English language down to the absolute most frequently used 50 adjectives, a surprisingly distinct picture of human psychology emerged. So let's look closely at this exact list.
It's a pretty fascinating premise, right? Think about it. If you were tasked with building a functioning society and you could only use 50 descriptive words, which ones would be absolutely essential? By analyzing these 50 foundational words, we're going to see what human beings truly prioritize in our daily communication. We aren't just looking at a vocabulary list here, we're looking at a mirror that reflects our most immediate concerns, our shared environments, and honestly, the very structure of how our brains categorize reality. Instead of just marching through an alphabetical list, we've broken this explainer down into 5 distinct themes: the vocabulary of extremes, time, space, and scale, good, better, best, the societal heavyweights, and finally, the human element. Kicking things off with Section 1, the vocabulary of extremes, the binary basics. Now, what's really fascinating here is just how many of these fundamental words exist as binary pairs. It really highlights that our basic perception of the world is, well, a vocabulary of extremes. When you scan the list, these pairings immediately jump right out at you: big and small, high and low, early and late. It suggests that at our very core, we humans categorize the world by defining the edges first. Long before we get into the nuanced middle ground of a situation, we absolutely need to know its outer boundaries.
And this brings up a brilliant, kind of surprising irony from our source material. Out of the entire spectrum of colors, only the absolute extremes of light and dark actually made the cut for these top 50 words. No way, right? No vibrant red, no calming blue, no natural green, just black and white. It really reinforces the idea that in our most common, everyday communication, we lean heavily on stark contrasts. We use these two words not just for physical colors, but as foundational concepts to describe things like clarity, legality, and opposition. Moving right along to Section 2, time, space, and scale, sizing things up. Notice how the physical, basic survival concepts here are almost entirely made up of really short words. A massive chunk of our most common adjectives are just 3 or 4 letters long. Think about words like big, old, new, and low. In linguistic evolution, the words we use the absolute most frequently tend to wear down over time into the shortest, most efficient sounds possible. They are literally the quick draw tools of our vocabulary. So the crucial takeaway here is that when you look at these specific adjectives stacked up together, you see just how heavily we rely on basic measurements of time, space, and scale just to navigate our environment. We're constantly assessing the age of things with new, old, and young. We're measuring dimensions with large, little, and long. Because let's face it, before we can even begin to discuss abstract philosophy or complex systems, we first have to agree on the physical parameters of the room we're standing in. All right, let's dive into Section 3, good, better, best, the value judgments. It is incredibly satisfying to see that this single word family appears entirely independently across the top 50 list. Good, better, and best all earned their very own distinct spots. We didn't just stop at bad and good. We actually needed highly specific gradients of positivity to communicate effectively. It really shows an innate human drive not just to evaluate things, but to constantly compare them and seek out the absolute pinnacle of quality. Which means an astonishing 6% of the absolute most common adjectives we use are entirely dedicated to this one specific progression of positive value. Out of all the descriptive words in the English language, the fact that 3 of the top 50 are locked up in this one positive trajectory tells us something pretty profound. As a species, we're totally wired to assess value. We are constantly negotiating our preferences, seeking improvement, and trying to identify the ideal. Next up is Section 4, the societal heavyweights, the complex constructs. Now, watching these formal, heavy institutional words stack up emphasizes just how incredibly complex and structured our common everyday language actually is. We aren't just hunter-gatherers describing big rocks and small berries anymore. Our top 50 list features total heavyweight concepts like economic, international, political, and federal. The presence of these words absolutely proves that our daily reality is deeply intertwined with large-scale human organization and governance. By juxtaposing these short physical words with those long institutional ones, we get a crystal clear visual story of human evolution, moving from basic survival to highly organized societies. On the one hand, we've got the primitive visceral vocabulary, bad, big, old. And on the other, the complex constructs that require a shared imagination just to exist, international, political, economic. It perfectly maps out the duality of the modern human condition. We are simultaneously navigating our immediate physical space and our massive abstract societal systems. And finally, Section 5, the human element, perception and truth. What I really love about this specific collection of words is how it reflects our deep psychological need to determine exactly what is true, certain, and real in a complicated world. Just look at these terms. They are entirely about perception and capability. Able, free, hard, easy. We are constantly measuring our own agency and trying to cut through the noise to find clarity. We use these adjectives to build trust, to verify reality, and ultimately to affirm our own human experience. To see these concepts in action, we went ahead and built this slightly absurd but totally cohesive mini-narrative. It is a sure, clear, and true fact that the whole international political and economic public is different but human. Get this. Every single descriptive word in that quote is pulled directly from the top 50 list. It demonstrates just how functional and comprehensive these core words really are. You can literally construct high-level philosophical observations about society using only the most basic building blocks of our language. But as we wrap up this explainer, the most profound takeaway might not actually be what we've just discussed, but rather what's missing from it. When we restrict our lens to only the 50 most frequently used adjectives, we create a very utilitarian, structured, and honestly, somewhat stark picture of reality. It's a world of big and small, good and bad, true and false, political and economic. It's highly functional, sure, but is it really the whole picture? I want to leave you with this final thought. If these 50 words frame the boundaries of our most common interactions, what vivid details are we leaving out of the conversation? If we're only painting with black, white, and binary extremes, we might be navigating our physical and societal spaces efficiently, but we might just be missing the nuanced, colorful, and poetic shades of life that fall outside that top 50. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and the next time you describe something, take a second to notice the hidden architecture of the words you choose.